live. I have started the stream on, I think, YouTube, so we should be
I
up
see
and
it
running.
on I see it on Twitch.
Oh, baby.
Let me
Nice.
check YouTube.
I see that it's running on YouTube. I see an
Yeah, we're
FPS.
also running on YouTube.
Oh my
All right.
god, look, we did this. We didn't even first try. Not even close. Okay, that's all I have to say.
All right. Well, with that, I'm gonna say hello, welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host Mango,
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
and today we're gonna talk a little bit about the finals. Before we do that, buddy, why don't you show the folks know what it is we do on this podcast?
On this podcast, we like to talk about games. And, listen, it has been a long time, okay? But in a weird way, I think of this as an origin story. I think of you as being, in a certain sense, like the spark that lit the fire, the match, the very tiny fire that is some terms talking about games, Manik. Why don't you introduce yourselves to the folks at home?
Well, I appreciate that, man. That's awesome. No, it's great to be back. Name's Manik. I have been playing video games with both of you for years, probably a little bit longer with Mango. A lot of fun stories playing FPSs, everything from waiting out in the cold for Call of Duty to playing long nights of PUBG. Yeah, man, I'm excited to be back.
I am always surprised at how many hours I put into PUBG. I think of myself as not having played a lot of PUBG, but then I'll look on Steam and I'm like, I really paid 120 hours of this. Like,
Yeah, it was a beautiful time.
it really was a different time. Okay,
It's like, where are we dropping, boys?
I
Rozak.
guess we're talking about every time. I guess we're talking about the finals, which is the new FPS from Nexon. Nexon, South Korea publisher. Right down the street from my house. Randomly enough, their offices are like 2 miles that way. And they put out a public beta. Maggie, you talked about it in the back half a couple of weeks ago, and then at the Game Awards, which I went to, at the Game Awards, they announced that the game was out, shadowdropped, it's live. We can just play it. And so we've been touching base. We've been getting our matches in. I guess I don't know. Where do you want to start? What's your high level view of the finals?
Yeah, so I'm very much enjoying it. I will say that I find the name infuriating. Like every time I'm trying to introduce someone, they're like, "What?" It's like the name of the game is the finals. But,
We get to the finals in the finals.
Yeah.
multiple times.
Once. Or, yeah, multiple times actually. We haven't been able to clinch it yet, but it's it to me it's like the meme I've been saying is like if Overwatch was good, which is obviously a little bit more aggressive, but I kind of feel that way. It's a fun competitive shooter with some very cool elements. Although the more I play, the more I see things like sliding into a meta that I am less happy about from a personal perspective, but it makes sense to me. And it's just kind of like scratch an itch that I've had for a while that like COD wasn't scratching for instance. Monik, what do you think? What's your highlight?
Yeah, I mean, I really love the game. I played a bit of it in the beta, so I was really anticipating the release because I feel like it was such a breath of fresh air compared to FPSs I played for the past 5-6 years. And like when I think about it, it feels like a pretty amazing synthesis of FPS innovation over the past 5 years. And like my framework of how I think about some of the FPS innovation is like you have all of these round-based shooters, right? And you have subcategories where you have more tactical round-based shooters, like let's say CS:GO. Then you have, or like Rainbow Six Siege. Then you have subcategories of more arcadey round-based shooters like COD, or you have hero-based, team-oriented round-based shooters like Overwatch and Valorant, which like Overwatch skews more towards ability-based, and Valorant skews more gunplay. And I feel like in those round-based, that high-level category of round-based shooter and team dynamics, like you always have a round, usually 1 to 2 teams, not more than that, and you have one discrete objective in that round. And then I think you have this other big trend, which is kind of the emergent battle royale category, right? And you have, again, this like bifurcation of like tactical and then this influence of hero base where you have the PUBGs of the world, and then you also have the Fortnites and Apexes of the world. And I feel like what the finals has done really well is you still have the beauty of the battle royale experience, and I liken it to the emotional narrative arc a player feels in a battle royale, where in a battle royale you have like a true narrative arc. You have like the exposition, you're looting shit, you're trying to like figure out the game world, you're figuring out where your team's dropping, and you're planning. and then you have maybe a couple of engagements, and then you actually have a climax at the end where you either die or you win on a singular engagement. And I feel like the player can't build that big narrative arc where like you can actually build tension in a round-based shooter, which is why I feel like those battle royales picked up so much, because you just feel more in a match of a battle royale, which I really loved. And I feel like, I guess my analysis of the finals is it gives you opportunities to have that narrative arc frequently, where you have consistent engagements, consistent climaxes in this objective-based cash-out mode, but at the same time, it's strategic and almost round-based, and you still have this longer arc of a tournament mode where those also feel like almost like a battle royale experience where you are trying to be the last one surviving in this tournament. So I think it's like a unique mix of these two big trends that I really think they nailed the formula.
Yeah, I
just on
definitely
that.
feel the mix of the two of those, because in a weird way, honestly, the thing that's been in my brain for like the longest time is that battle royales are FPS, are like PvP FPS roguelikes, essentially, right? And this doesn't have it doesn't have like the roguelike piece of it, which is like, you know, you enter with a set loadout, you know what your loadout is going to be, right? But it does weirdly kind of have that feeling of another, you know, like another, like just like one more run kind of thing.
Right.
Specifically because of the way the game has these specific mechanics around team wipes, right? When a team wipe happens, they force you not to trickle, right? It is technically a punishment, but it's also kind of a bonus, because like, so the other, you know, the other version of this is I played 1 million hours of Overwatch, right? Overwatch 2. The worst thing about Overwatch 2, your whole team dies, but they die 15 seconds from the first kill to the last kill, right? So the first person reses 15 seconds before the last person does, and then they walk in, and then they get, you know, ganged up on and killed, and now we're waiting for that person, and it's like you're trickling, right? You're creating this like this trickle. The right way to play Overwatch is you wait for everybody to get there, everybody to group up, and then you go in kind of like 5v5. The finals forces that on you, but in a sort of negative way, in the sense that when 2 people die, their respawn counters start ticking, but if the third person dies, the whole team gets 1 uniform respawn counter and it resets to 0, right? So that's a punishment. It adds more respawn. It completely resets your clock, but it actually also forces you to respawn as a group, as a team, right? So that you don't run into those sorts of situations where you're just trickling over and over again, because, you know, when that happens, you'll just get the team wipe and kind of like move forward. And so there's something about that piece of it that like tickles, I don't know, like the roguelike piece of my brain, where it's just like I don't feel quite so bad when I die or when we wipe, because we all just come back and we're right back in it together, basically. And then it also tickles kind of that tactical, strategic piece of my brain that I like from Overwatch when it comes to, you know, like finding objectives, defending, you know, there are portions of our play in the tournament mode where we're at a cash out box and we just need to like hold up for a minute and fight everybody off. And that feels like Overwatch to me. That feels like a lot of fun. And it's the kind of, you know, round-based tactical shooter, you know, insight that I'm kind of looking for. And so I think I probably do agree that it is maybe the most innovative like PvP shooter I have seen in, I don't know, maybe since the original PUBG, to be honest.
So I think part of this too is that the game modes are all ones that require you to be active to win, right? Like compared to say an Overwatch or a Team Fortress 2, a lot of the modes are either static or like in terms of like cart pushing.
Right.
Like one team is incentivized to stall, right? And like that can bog down pretty heavily. And you're with the finals, you're never, including the team respawn mechanic, right? You're never in a position where like it's just kind of like, well, the defensive team is winning hard and they just need to hold out for their like 10 minutes, and it's just like fuck, right? Like we've lost this, but we have to wait it out, or like, you know, do some sort of surrender mechanic. The winning team is actively winning, and I think also the fact that there's more than 2 teams per round, except for the final of the finals.
Yeah.
Leads to a dynamic where it's like it is hard to overwhelm. And if you do and then in the final round, if you are overwhelming, you win with 2 cash outs, right? Like you just straight win, and so you can't ever be losing so hard that you get. This is the thing that we talked about, buddy, previously when we talked about battle royales and why they were attractive, is that it resets quick. You get another round and you don't have to think about it, and it's not quite as quick in this game, but it does. It doesn't have the long drawn out defeats like you have in either like a round based type Counter Strike, where you have to go through at least a set of rounds even if you're losing, or like a team based objectives where one team wants to stall the other team out instead of both aggressively pursuing the objective.
Yeah, I think this has everything to do with the steal mechanic, to be honest with you. I was
exactly, yeah.
Because,
that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, the way that it works, just for folks who haven't played the game, is when you are essentially, the game is about cashing out money, right? So you go, let's say you find a box. That box has a certain amount of money in it. You bring it to a cash out station, and then that cash out process takes time. Maybe it takes 10 seconds, maybe it takes a minute, right? But it takes a certain amount of time. And in that window, another team could show up, kill all of us, right? And then intercept the cash out and steal it for themselves, so that when the final tick of, this minute long process goes off, all of the money goes to them instead of all of the money kind of like coming to us. And I really don't know any other game that has a mechanic that is quite so, like, even in Overwatch, right? Like if I do a team kill in Overwatch, right? We're playing push or something like that, right? It still takes me time to reset the robot. The robot has to go all the way to the other side. And it's not like I immediately get a bunch of progress for free, right? Maybe I do a team wipe. We get the robot into a push position. I make it 5 meters, and then, the enemy team takes control again, and I get kind of nothing. But like, if I get a team wipe in the finals on a cash box, like a lot of the time that just results in a full steal. I take all of the, it is an all in kind of way to score points.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I feel it's like this, you have these multiple climax moments, and you still have this weird, interesting strategic gameplay, like something in an Overwatch we were defending. But if you're the attacker in Overwatch, like I haven't played Overwatch enough, but in most of the modes, I feel like you don't have the ability to take something away from the player and just like steal the objective or steal the win. And I think that moment-to-moment gameplay that happens multiple times with multiple cash outs that also rotate across the map, which I think goes to the other big innovation, which is the environmental destructibility, where now you have, again, like a climax arc multiple times in one singular round, while also having strategic play happening at the same time, which is pretty damn cool.
Yeah, because you can do stuff like we encountered this a bunch, right? The cash out box is on the second floor, and a guy with a sledgehammer on the first floor, or
Right.
like he plants an explosive charge to drop the floor out from under us. And now all of a sudden we're in the disadvantageous position, and they have the box right in front of them, right? Or other sorts of things, like just being able to, crash through walls to open up new avenues to sort of attack, to surprise people, because they're just not expecting enemies to be coming from this way, right? There were multiple times where I definitely got owned because I was not expecting a heavy to be just like on the other side of this wall, that kind of a thing.
And I think like that feature of environmental destructibility, like going back to your commentary, buddy, on some of the hard decisions they've made from a game design perspective to almost elicit more team play, which is like teams responding together. I feel like when I play games like Apex Legends, where you have huge environment and ideally you should be playing with your team, if you get out of position with your team on that massive environment in any engagement, either an attack or defense or someone springing up or third partying you, unless you have a hero that has a clear movement ability, it's very hard to reposition and then play with your team, even with the long TTK Apex has. And over here, I feel like with the map design that's like a lot of verticality and the ability to destroy and change the environment on the fly, it's almost like you make your own engagement zones, which helps the player be more creative, which I think is like this interesting mastery angle of how to actually manipulate the environment in your favor. But also I think it gives a lot more tools for the players to play with their team and reposition. So I've never felt like in the finals where I'm just so completely out of left field from the team, unless I completely went on the other side of the map. But if we're playing around the similar area, I have multiple options to get to you relatively quickly in an engagement and not feel like I was just missing from action and that's why we lost. And I don't have that feel in battle royale games, even with movement abilities in Apex, just by the sheer fact of destructibility being a way to manipulate the environment and allow for repositioning, which I think helps the team play quite a bit.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. Like that is the other marquee feature of the game is the destructible environments. It's kind of taking a bunch of like, because it's got like basically similar but not identical class identity to say Team Fortress 2, right?
Mm.
And a lot of actually similar mechanics there too, which is interesting to me. With kind of like this like aggressive structure that's kind of like maybe battle royale inspired, like we were talking about.
Sure.
And then this destructible element, which is like it's the thing that I think keeps the game feeling fresh across the same maps because there's not a ton of maps, right?
Yeah.
And they're not super huge, like say the Apex map or like the Fortnite map.
Yeah.
But I guess the Fortnite map is technically destructible too, but it's not not in the same way, right? Like you don't think about it, like
well, I mean, it's like environment manipulation on the opposite direction. It's like you build your environment versus just
like you can build a bunker,
but,
right, rather than
yeah. And it's also like real physics as opposed to like wonky,
cartoon
physics.
Right,
physics.
exactly. Yeah. It's like just craziness constantly. But I mean, like going back to the hero and class system, like I actually think that was also an interesting decision because I feel like if we're looking at the lens of like monetization strategy, my feeling is, and this might be a hot take, but I think games like Overwatch or even Valorant, which are these hero-based shooters, I wonder in early design sessions, the choice to a hero-based shooter was made because of the fact that you have a much longer road for monetization on multiple heroes, cosmetics for each hero, skins for each hero, voice lines for each hero, et cetera, kind of goes on to infinity. And I think once you go down that path, I feel like the competitive dynamic changes so much where it's harder for player readability in a match. If I go into a Valorant match right now, compared to, let's say, CSGO, and actually why I think Valorant has not been able to beat CSGO in a lot of ways is since it requires a lot of mechanical skill and plays with those types of like tactical elements, but the kind of knowledge a player needs to actually engage competitively in a match is so high because there's so many fucking heroes. And they keep coming out with
we
more
call
of
that what's that called? Onboarding, right? The amount of knowledge that is required in order to like, play up to sort of a I don't want to call it like a median skill floor, but kind
to
of
even enjoy it. Like I feel like because like otherwise you feel like I don't know what I'm doing wrong and I don't know what ability is killing me and I don't know how the ability manifests on the map.
Yeah.
And I feel like by limiting the class choice to 3 with very readable like profiles, very clear slots and roles, like I think they might have hurt themselves from a monetization standpoint because you can add new weapons, new skins, but you don't have enough play space.
I'm never going to care about that. Yeah, it's interesting. In Overwatch, I care about skin. Like something I've said in the podcast is I'll do the battle pass when it's a skin. I've done 2 of them. I did the Genji skin, the very first one, because I thought that was rad, and I did I think the 3rd one or the 4th one because I was playing a lot of Sigma. I really liked Sigma, and it was a Sigma skin, and I was like, this skin is baller as fuck. I'm gonna play Overwatch this season, basically. There's no way I would ever make that decision about the finals because there's no
costumes.
It's like dude. I don't know. It's just there's no personality there, right? Like there's nothing like there's no texture to grab onto. And I think that's why Overwatch, I mean, like even now, Overwatch is the most reviled game on the planet, like the most poorly reviewed game on Steam because of these review bombs, or whatever. But like you see, and I can't believe I'm making this reference, but I saw it on Twitter. Pornhub put out like their top gaming things of the year, and it's just a bunch of Overwatch characters. People clearly like these Overwatch characters, and I just think that that's a little bit of where they're shooting themselves in the foot, right? There's no without characters, there's no personalities to kind of connect to, and without those personalities, there's not that drive to be like, I'm gonna buy a skin.
That's interesting because Team Fortress 2, in an attempt to like keep the profiles readable, right? Like they famously did hats, right? Hats, right? But they were also out of loot boxes, which is a thing that's thankfully moving into the past. Yeah, it is kind of weird how much Team Fortress 2 gets a pass for having, real money loot boxes that you
Right.
could sell for dollars on like the internal Steam store, right? Like,
Yeah.
uh, but all to your point though, the characters all had personalities, right? Even though it was the heavy, everybody knows, or everybody who played the game knows the heavy is a large Russian man who I have yet to see a man who can outsmart bullets, right? Like there are tons of memes from that era.
Yeah.
Because even though they're generic characters, they were assigned personalities.
Right.
Whereas the characters in the finals do not, like, and even the announcers, like, they're kind of like sports people, but they don't have the same, like the announcer in Rumbleverse had a personality.
Right.
Skip Legerday, right? Like, you remember who he was, but like these are just kind of like I think the woman's named Anna. I couldn't tell you, and like you got like the basic sportsy stuff, but they don't have enough personality to even like sell that on you.
Yeah, like StarCraft, for instance, they sold announcers, right? That was one of their big things.
Right.
And so you could get like, I don't know, you could get like Alarak or Artanis or, Raynor to like voice your match. And I think that was like a thing that they could kind of sell based on the personalities of these StarCraft characters, right? But yeah, I don't even think, I mean, the announcers are also controversial in the finals because they are, they're AI, right? Like,
there's a whole controversy on that. Yeah.
I don't actually. I tried looking into this, but honestly, it just doesn't seem like there's any hard information because Steam has a really strict policy against AI stuff, right? Where they basically say unless you can prove that you owned the data, all of the data that this thing was trained on, you can't use AI in a game featured on the Steam store. For a voice, you just need the voice rights. So theoretically, they got voice actors to sign away their voice rights to make the AI announcers for the finals. That's fair enough by kind of Steam's ethical standards. But there's a question of like, was that process ethical? That hasn't been answered. I haven't been able to find people to actually talk about it because generally speaking, I'm looking at people who are actively invested in one side of the AI conversation or the other and not really just like a fact-finding mission. Because one of the things that has happened in the past is voice actors have signed contracts that didn't have, they call them AI writers right now. That didn't have AI writers, and then the people they signed the contract with fed the voice lines that they essentially bought into an AI, which the actor believes is a form of theft, right? The studio believes, hey, you sold me your voice for this thing. All I did was just kind of, like in a certain mechanical sense, all I did was pass this through a filter that is not, whatever. And nobody I don't think anyone has really gotten to the bottom of where those two things kind of interact and if it happened in an ethical way when it comes to the finals.
Yeah, so the thing about the AI thing that's like weird to me is that it's not even being used in an interesting way.
Yeah.
Right? Like it would be interesting if like they were on the fly coming up with commentary, but it's all pre-generated, right? It's all static content that like it's like waveforms that are in the file. Which is disappointing, I guess, right? Like if you're gonna go for AI, I'd say at least like try and do something fun with it.
Yeah, because like you would think, I mean, one of the things I've been thinking about a lot, to be honest with you, since we got really into Darktide, is how good the music in Darktide is and the sound design in general, but also just like the music, because musical cues in the score will tell you what's going on. Is a horde approaching? What kind of boss are you about to fight? Right? Are you, are you in some sort of danger? Right? You can tell this stuff because of the way that the game programs the music to kick in and fade out, kind of thing. This is also true of Overwatch, right? At the very end of an Overwatch match, they kind of ramps up the music so it gets a thing. Overwatch might be the first example I can think of a game that like dynamically messes with music levels in order to kind of heighten the feel of a match, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I feel like what I would want to do if I was the sound director or whatever, the voice director of the finals, is use the AI in a very similar sort of way, right? Where the AI isn't just, making blasé comments about like these stock team names, right? But you feed the AI information from the match such that it can tell you when you make a good play because it understands, right? Or it can tell you important information because it can go read like an enemy player's gamer tag. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It doesn't really do any of that stuff. So it's kind of like,
Yeah.
why did you even bother?
Yeah, for me, it's like accelerate more. Like train this AI on FPS commentators on Twitch for the past like 5 years, and layer that on top of your gameplay, and also give us AI voice for any team names we want. And like that would be fun. Like that, I think would be really cool.
Yeah, like how cool would it
Yeah.
be if you walked into a match and it said, you know, the Eternal Tango, right? Unwise,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah.
As these,
And the
you know-
technology exists.
Yes,
Let's do it.
exactly. I mean, I guess you would get like the abuse cases where it would say a bunch
Yeah.
of like racial slurs or whatever, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, the naggers, right? Like,
Yeah,
we're about to get banned
clip
on
that.
Twitch.
No. I'll clip it. Yeah, I mean that would have been really exciting. I mean, I feel like at least what they should do. Well, I mean, the whole game show aesthetic. I'm curious what you both think about it. Like, I don't identify with it. The only things I like about it, I mean, they hard committed to the game show aesthetic, so I got to give them props for like, almost every design like aesthetic decision lines up with it. I don't think anything's out of place. I just don't like the theming outside of the coins, like killing the players and then bursting into coins and having that coin noise and then all like sprinkling the floor in particle effects. Like that's cool, but the game show aesthetic was just like a weird theme to go with, and I don't know what it would look like in another theme, but I wish it was a different theme personally.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't care.
I feel like it's halfway between a game show and like professional sports, right? It's not like quite tuned all the way in a direction, right? Because like I would first would have said it was like, you know, pro sports, but you're right. It is to also have a little bit of that the game show thing, but it's not like you know, Rumbleverse. It's not like turned all the way up to
Sure.
ridiculous levels for humor, right? Like it's just kind of like normal, right? Like
I kind of feel like it would have been better if they just went balls to the walls with it, like humor galore, breaking fourth wall type stuff while in the match.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of fun.
I almost wish they went like I can't make this reference. I never saw Squid Game, but I want to say Squid Game, right? You know, like a reality show, but like a fucked up reality show. Maybe they can't do that because the movie Gamer. Do you guys remember that movie from like 10 or 15 years ago? It's an old Gerard Butler movie. It's an old Gerard Butler movie where like it's like the dystopian future where when you're playing a video game, you're jacking into the brains of these convicts and actually killing people. It is a dog shit movie. It's super bad.
That sounds
and
interesting. I'm in.
But like it like that is actually kind of an aesthetic I could maybe get behind, right?
Yeah. That would be a cool narrative on top of it. Yeah, I mean, like there's no lore at the finals right now, and that might hurt its long-term prospects, I feel.
Yeah, but it might also help, right? Like we saw how much like having implied lore that never gets addressed.
Yeah,
like,
people just like
people
don't
who
care
like
anymore.
Overwatch.
Yeah. Like just give me a good game. I don't fucking care about your story.
I mean, Overwatch had a lot of lore. It just didn't have story, which I found obviously to be very frustrating, right? It's the same thing with like League of Legends. League of Legends has a lot of lore, right? It just has no story. It never moves anywhere. It never goes forward. It just introduces. And did you know that there's secretly, you know, a man-sized duck
Anymore, right?
I guess that's true. Yeah, I mean, and they're going to make their MMO, right? And the MMO will probably have like a central story, kind of like WoW, right?
Yeah. Also Project L, but yeah.
Do you think that lore is like required? Like CS:GO doesn't have any lore, right?
No.
I guess.
Have lore?
Yeah, I don't
Does
know.
what have lore? Which one you meant?
Rocket League.
Rocket League doesn't have lore.
No.
But like Valorant, Apex, Overwatch, I feel like all of those have lore because they want to sell you things, right? You know, they want to sell you skins. They want to sell you.
Yeah.
But you just really forget about Titanfall.
Rest in peace, my beloved Titanfall.
That was a great fucking multiplayer experience. That was awesome. I just feel like it's like what type of player they're trying to appeal to. Yeah. And again, it goes to like what are these fundamental game design decisions that people are making early on in the game's journey. And it's like, well, we don't really want heroes, which that means we don't really need to be a lore universe. We could just focus on just fundamentals, which I tend to prefer. I think that's why like something like CSGO has had such massive staying power, even though it's never really gotten behind any of these trends that have emerged over the years. I think they did dabble in a battle royale mode, which failed pretty quickly. But for me, like a person who's going in for a multiplayer competitive FPS, like most of their enjoyment is I'm mastering a skill and I'm getting better in the game, or I'm having this fun strategic team experience with a group of friends. And like the lore, and I will build my own stories with my friends in this game. I don't really care about the external lore. Um, at least I think I feel like that's the wide majority of FPS players. While I feel like games like Overwatch, which in my opinion were trying to siphon off and build a hybrid of what is the player group that likes MOBAs, and maybe they have more of a proclivity to enjoy narrative and the aesthetics of the hero and the stories of the hero. Let's bring that into this FPS mold. And I think they are like trying to appeal to two types of player experiences, in my opinion. And personally, that's why I never got into Overwatch, because I'm like, that's not why I want to play this game.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting. Because I definitely think that in general, I think that players say they want this, but they don't. Right? Mm-hmm. Players, I always think about this in WoW terms, because this is where it always comes up. Right? You know, theoretically speaking, if I wanted to, I could design a class that plays exactly the same as Arms Warrior does, but they don't have any flavor at all, right? They are just class 1, and they have ability 1, ability 2, ability 3, okay? And you know, when you press ability 1, it does this amount of damage, and that maps onto Mortal Strike in game. But like at the end of the day, the buttons that you're pushing, just, you know, they have this mechanical number effect. There's no lore, there's no flavor, there's nothing on top of that, right? Players constantly say that they want this, right? But they also demonstrate that they don't want this, because part of the fantasy of WoW is I'm playing an Arms Warrior, so I'm a brutal, efficient tactician on the battlefield. There is no one who is better at wielding my weapon than me. My whole game plan is around building up for these really devastating hits, because I'm the best, I'm just like the best guy with a sword that you could possibly like bring to this fight, right? Whereas like the lore of like a berserker, a fury warrior is that of a berserker, right? You are constantly pressing buttons because you are on the seat of your pants, just relying on your adrenaline and rage to carry you where technique will not, right? And I understand that those two different flavors of warrior play very differently, and the way that they are designed, on the numbers influence how they feel to play as a person in terms of that kind of fantasy. But I think at the end of the day, I kind of just think the fantasy in like FPS games is you shoot guys, like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I don't know that anybody needed the fantasy of terrorists. What's the other thing in CSGO?
Counter-terrorists.
Really? I thought it was terrorists and agents or whatever. Terrorists and counter-terrorists, right? Yeah, exactly. I don't think anybody cares about that when it comes to CSGO, especially because I don't know, I haven't played enough CSGO to really like comment on that stuff. Right? Yeah. But there's a certain level of assumption of symmetry, right? That goes into stuff like that, where it's not like the terrorists can have I don't know. I don't even know what I would.
In CS:GO, people didn't care about the theming; they cared about AK versus M4. Like, what is the two teams that I have? What are the weapons and abilities granted to them that make the play different? I could care less about the theming. But what's really interesting is the M4 recoil pattern is very different than the AK recoil pattern, and I can one shot with the AK, again, one shot. Like all those types of things become more interesting to the player, I feel.
Yeah, and that's definitely true, right? And that's definitely true in how we were playing the finals, but in almost like a team-based way, right? Like it was just about us as a team. And I liked the version of my build where I was using the recon scan and I could call out targets because I was seeing through walls or whatever, versus the version of it where I was playing the heavy and I was just trying to be up front with my shotgun and get my 4 shots off and, not get completely owned or whatever, right? Like that's another like piece of it, but at that point you're just playing team sports, right? You're not really engaging in a fantasy. It's not like when you're pitching a baseball, you're engaging in a fantasy,
right?
Yeah, though I think that there is a level that like that's maybe why they went with the theming that they did, is that like you're playing team sports and the theme is team sports, right? Like it's
let's not pretend. Let's just like make this. You're playing a game. It's a game. It's a game show thing. Yeah.
and you avoid like little missteps there, right? Like, because the other thing I was thinking of is that like, movement wise, this game is not like maybe the highest movement game, but it's higher movement than a lot of kind of like,
Yeah.
say COD, or a lot of the kind of like the slower shooters that dominated, say like the mid aughts. I wouldn't quite call it like, like Quake levels, but like it is
No.
closer, I think, to Quake than it is to like Halo maybe.
For sure. I mean, on the light class, like the skill ceiling for movement is very high. When you factor in evasive dash and building momentum off as you're crouch jumping and sliding across things, like it's
Oh my
there's
God.
definitely a lot of play space there.
That's like Tribes. I made this.
Oh my God, I love Tribes.
I loved Tribes back in the day. I made this comparison while we were on the call, but I was just thinking because they had, Tribes, you also had light, medium, heavy, right?
Right. Yeah.
But like they were pretty wildly different, the light, medium, and heavy in Tribes. Also, shout out to my old love, not Avatar, Anthem. I also had like light, medium, heavy, and then they also had like fucking caster, right? They had fucking wizard in their game, basically.
Oh man, no, Anthem's interesting because it's like there's another game coming out that like looks like it's Anthem.
Oh my God, I know. I saw it at the Game Awards, and it has some dumb name. I don't remember any of the fucking names for these games that I saw in the Game Awards.
There's only one looter shooter ever worth playing.
Is it? Are you say Destiny?
Definitely
it's the greatest
Destiny.
of all time.
Oh my
Destiny.
God! Yeah, my understanding, everybody hates Destiny right now.
Lore is getting wilder and wilder.
Is it really?
Yeah, they're pulling all the ripcords because there's not going to be anybody left to write it by the end of the year.
Yeah.
We can talk about this in the back half. I actually do want to know more.
Expansion.
Yeah, I have a couple of friends who play Destiny, and they all tell me that the lore the story's gotten really bad, and that's a lot of why they're not playing the most recent expansions.
I'd say like the overarching narrative and where it's headed is interesting, but the day-to-day writing and how it's communicated in the most recent expansion was quite poor.
Okay.
Like, they got like the B or the C team to write the dialogue, but in terms of the actual like arc of what is happening and what they're trying to move towards and what is
That
kind of
sounds
the
like
cosmology of the universe that they've built, it's still pretty cool.
yeah, that sounds like the prequels, right? The prequels problem. I describe this with we don't have to talk about this now. I'll come back to this. Let's talk about the finals.
Yeah, exactly.
Listen, clearly they should add a PvE mode to the finals. Then I would play it so fucking
That's what
much.
they're missing, dude. They need more heroes. They need a PvE mode.
Yeah, they need a really strong IP. They should reach out to the Warhammer people, see if they can find something. If there's some space for an FPS Warhammer shooter, PvE shooter.
And throw a battle royale mode in there too.
Yeah.
At this rate.
I'm just imagining this game as like a Tau shooter instead of Dark Tide is the what's it called, the
Imperial Guard.
The Imperial Guard, thank you. Yes. Yeah. Man.
How much longer do you expect that you're going to be like into the finals, Manik?
Hard to. I mean, it seems like they're moving pretty quickly on updates. Like they've already put a major patch out today that I actually agree with almost all the decisions in that patch.
Can you go over them quickly because I did not see that.
Yeah. I don't have them up right now, but I'll pull them up. But at a high level, what they did was they nerfed some of the heavy abilities and some of the damage soaking stuff that the heavy had, like their mesh shield and their dome shield. So some of the health decreased on those components. They changed some of the one-shot components like C4 and the RPG damage and radius of the RPG damage. So, which helps a lot because I feel like, at least if you're playing light or even medium at times, like the damage on C4 and RPG is quite significant. And then the big one that they changed was how mines work, where now mines have an arming time. Because I feel like a lot of times we'd be approaching a point or leaving a point and people just like tossing gas mines and being hyper reactive versus kind of being thoughtful and planning out where they want to position the gas mine, how people are going to approach. So I think that was a smart decision. I think all of it is really targeted against making the dominance of heavy less, which I think is good because I think two heavies and a medium is a very hard comp to beat.
Yeah, I mean we ran into that twice, which was really painful.
I agree. That was actually a thing I wanted to talk about was the balance because But it's got a very solid shell. But like I said at the beginning, it feels like we're sliding into like a very rigid meta,
Yeah.
which I'm not super happy about, right? So like things that'll shake that up, I think are good. But yeah, no, that those changes make a lot of sense, making the heavy less tanky. And I think the RPG change makes a lot of sense because I think ideally one RPG is like basically must take on the heavy right now, um, and I think the ideal design space for it is remote terrain destruction
Right.
rather
Exactly.
than
Yeah,
as
I feel like there should be some hidden modifier where it does like 25% damage to players, right? Like maybe if you
Right.
get somebody down to like 1 and you snipe them with your RPG, I
You
think
should
that's
get
a
it, yeah.
fair kill, right?
Right.
But something in your gadget slot like that should not be essentially functioning as a second gun, kind of.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I think well, Manik said though, I think that's the way to do it, right? It's like if you get a direct hit with it, you can reward the player for that because that's like a hard thing to do. It's not a hit scam
Oh,
weapon.
sure. Yeah.
Uh, um, but and like when you hit a wall, right? Like you're breaking a section of wall, right? Like you're not really, doing kind of like the area doesn't actually like the area only matters. Area effect only matters for like damage to players. I feel not for like damage to structures because like you can, like the way the damage model works is you break sections, not exactly like actual. It's not like real physics. Is my point.
Sure. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, so in a nutshell, I mean, I'm hopeful since they're putting out patches pretty frequently that I feel like I'm worried about burnout because I'm playing a lot of it. I haven't gotten the feeling yet that I'm getting bored of it yet, just due to the nature of how dynamic the rounds are, and I still haven't unlocked everything. That's another thing. I feel like the unlock progression is probably a smidge too slow. Where I put in like a solid, probably I don't even know, probably 15 plus hours at this point, and I still haven't unlocked everything on light. I've barely touched heavy, so you have to put in a healthy amount of hours to actually unlock playstyles, which I think can be a pro and a con depending on the player they're trying to appeal to. But I feel like with a handful of more maps, maybe 2 other new modes that are as well designed as Cash Out, like I think it has a pretty decent amount of staying power compared to other games that are out there in
Yeah.
this design space.
I feel like it could kind of carve out a piece of, you know what I mean? Like I think that anytime a shooter comes out, it's just looking to kind of chunk
Right.
5 or 10% of like the addressable market and hold on to that, right? And so you have your mainstays. It's like CS:GO, Valorant, Overwatch, a bunch of the titles that we've like talked about. Like these are the people who are in the game playing what you're like looking for, and you're just looking to like, can I take enough Overwatch players who are pissed off at Blizzard for canceling PvE mode or whatever? Can I
Right.
can I find enough people who really hate like the current Valorant balance changes, right?
Right.
And get those players to be sticky, because I feel like that's just like what has to happen if you want to have a successful PvP shooter.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on that. It's they're not you can't really in this space anymore play to win. Like I think maybe like a decade ago, COD was like we are just destroying everything, and now there's a lot more pockets. I feel.
Yeah, because
I
like
feel
it's
COD is go on.
it's always funny to me because there are some of these games that I hear about and I'm just like, people are still playing that. Like the Battlefront game, the Star Wars Battlefront is like, yeah, it's still plugging along. It has players. People, I guess, like that game. It sounded dog shit to me, but my understanding is that it's a pretty dog shit game. But like, listen, if they have their 500,000 players to like justify servers, or good for them.
Yeah.
I think they got rid of the most onerous parts of the monetization of the Battlefront thing, which is why it kind of like rebounded. But like with COD, I think COD is still pretty dominant. It's just like to your point, buddy, you're not trying to peel people off of COD because like you're not like those games are like big because they're big, right? Like you play it because that's what everybody else plays, and then you can also get like sick KD ratios and do 360 no scopes, right? Which is why skill-based matchmaking is such like a controversy in that game.
Oh my god!
Whereas like it's actually like it appears that it's the same space, but it's actually the competitive shooter space, which I think Overwatch is failing. Is that the real kind of draw of Overwatch is the story stuff that like isn't really present in the game, and that none of the players care about, but the fans care about in kind of like a disparate way. So you're trying to peel people off of Overwatch and CS:GO because it's like because people are bad at Blizzard, like you said, or out of the competitive shooter space rather than or out of the when I say competitive, I mean like true competitive space rather than out of the whole FPS space. 'Cause the whole FPS space is like actually multiple spaces jammed into one, if that makes sense.
I also think that there's this effect of slushing. I think of it as slushing around, like the bottom bit of like soda in a can or something. This is how people play games. You slush around, right? Where it's like, oh, a new game came out. Me and my friends were gonna go play that. Oh,
Right.
the new WoW patch. We're gonna go back to WoW. Oh, the new PoE season. We're gonna go play Path of and it's like. It's not that you're specifically targeting certain players and you're holding on to them forever. Like if there's one thing I like about the Overwatch monetization model, right? I've talked about is the way the battle pass works in Overwatch. It's super easy to complete, and they have these really short specific seasons where it basically just gives you a really clear, concrete goal to like work towards, right? And because the seasons are short, it gives them a lot of kind of like recapture room where it's like, okay, every 9 weeks we're going to do a new season and we're going to have a new chase thing and we're going to do a big splash. It's going to be all over Twitter for a day. People are going to say, oh, I love Anna. I'm going to get this robot Anna skin, right? They play for a couple of months, and right when they're going to get burned out and they're going to hate everything and they're never going to touch the game again, well, something else has come out. They've already got their Anna skin. They're just going to move on, right? And that player is like a recapturable player. That player is now slushing around, right? And I feel like there are a lot of players who do that for a lot of different games, and all of us are kind of on that boat, right? You know, it's the kind of thing where the finals could fall by the wayside, but then a year from now, some patch, some announcement just catches somebody's eyes and it's like, hey, do you guys want to come back to play the finals?
Right. And hopefully they're hoping that when people slush back to it, it's like, we got this really nice cosmetic you can buy. It's really neat.
And then you can do that thing where you get people to buy the season pass, but then don't complete it, right? You know, like I was talking to somebody about this the other day. It was just like, how many times have you bought the season pass for a thing and then not actually completed it? And it's like, man, I actually have done that a number of times. I did that with Diablo, right? I told myself I was going to play the first Diablo season, but really I just burned myself out on the base game, and I'll probably go back to Diablo 4. I'm sure I'll go back at some point. One of the seasons will just kind of like pick up, right? But until then, I'm just going to kind of be doing like other shit or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe this is just live service games as a whole is what we're describing.
Yeah. Right.
I think we are starting to exit the live service game era, and
really?
like there are some that'll stick around. I just think that the thing I think that might kick it off more than anything is like the massive success of Baldur's Gate 3, right? Like, and this comes along with Cyberpunk 2077 being good finally, right? Like
also like the live service like mainstays that Sony paying a pretty penny for Bungie and then them missing revenue targets consistently. It's like, okay, well, we thought the live service gravy train was going to continue onwards, and it's actually players are souring over it over time.
Oh, that's
like there's a limit.
Maybe this is just because have a certain window into the industry. To me, all of this is driven not from kind of the bottom up of player sentiment, is driven from the top down of how this funding happens, which is to say that interest rates were really low, cash was cheap, and if you just kind of needed to keep somebody along, it wasn't a huge deal in order to make that happen. But now that interest rates are back up again, investors get very, very spooky, and I think that's exactly what happened to Bungie, right? They essentially I feel like Sony thought, hey, free money, let's buy this game, right? And then all of a sudden, oh god, our debt costs a lot now, right? This thing has to work. Right.
Yeah, I mean they were willing to pay a premium valuation due to the macro environment for sure. Yeah. And now they're like, oh shit, what do we buy?
I think those things go hand in hand though, because like the revenue doesn't stay afloat enough to justify the investment if the players aren't engaging with the live service game, right? Like I mean, MMOs have a staying power that's great. Like it's like the only first live service game. It'll be the first and the last live service game, will be World of Warcraft, which is not exactly the first, and it probably won't be the last. But like, you know,
I was having a conversation with a friend of mine where we were talking about what if every game genre was named like Souls-likes or roguelikes, right? Where like the one that, MMOs are Ultima-likes. The first live service game is Ultima Online. Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted.
No. And it's, for whatever reason, the MMOs just like operate on a different set of logic because I guess people aren't invested in things. But like the other live service games were like, they were like the MMOification almost of every other genre, but I'm not convinced that people like it as much, or at least not enough that like it's working, right? Like, WoW is so big and has so many things that it can keep your attention across a variety of fronts, but like Destiny is the closest thing. Like I would say that Destiny is the closest thing that could try to, but I don't think it actually succeeded on that metric, at least not by enough of a margin to make it worth it.
Right.
Like we've seen so many, like even before kind of like rates went up, we saw a bunch of these live service games just kind of like start and crash and burn within like a year, right? Like Rumbleverse. I love Rumbleverse, right? I played that game a ton.
Yeah.
And it just like it couldn't sustain itself, right?
Yeah, I mean, same thing.
Yeah.
We did a whole episode on Outriders, right? The Square Enix Destiny game.
Yeah.
I liked that game, fair enough. That was pretty fun. We played the whole campaign. I was like, I'm not really looking to do this like end game gearing shit, but maybe I'll come back for future stuff. I'm pretty sure that game is shut down now.
Yeah.
That makes, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also tough because MMOs, I mean, we've talked about it in the back half a couple of times about the third place, right, thing where, people will discover that stupid book. What is that fucking book called? It's not a stupid book. It's a good book, but they'll discover this book. Is it Bowling Alone? Is that the book?
Oh, by Robert Putnam?
Yeah. We're talking about
book?
yeah, it's the book about how like nobody has the church that they go
that's
to.
Going Alone.
Okay, yeah. And a point that you and I have made on a number of occasions is that essentially we just made video games right? And I think that this is the core what World of Warcraft actually sells you in material terms tends to be a third place, right? It is a nexus of congregation where you and your buds can get together for a couple of hours, clear some dungeons, right? Where every week at this time of night, you show up and, you get together with a team of 20 people and everyone's laughing and having a good time and you're killing bosses in a raid, right? And I feel like because most of these other live service games don't go quite as big as MMOs do in terms of the social networking side of the game design, right? For instance, in WoW, think of like the social interactions that you and I have because I like crafting and I put a lot of time and effort into my professions, and you can go, hey, can you craft me this belt? And I go, sure. Yeah, send me a work order, and then you do, and then I craft it. And it's like that kind of stuff. I feel like WoW has tons of it, and most other live service games have very, very little of it. It's really just, do you want to get on and play live service game, right? Whereas WoW has all of the other sorts of reasons to like interact.
No, I think that's actually really important because it also like most of the games you have to bring the socialness with you, right? Like there are matchmaking stuff for Destiny, but it's only ever like 5 people, right? Like
and they still, I mean, to this, it took them till basically this month to have in-game fire team finding or team finding. Otherwise, you had to look external to the game to actually build your team in any way or find a team to play with. Which
really,
I remember in the brief moments I played WoW, like it was very easy to jump into a dungeon, even not playing at the highest level, but actually get into play with a group of people to experience that social aspect. It was very low friction.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I gotta say, playing Season of Discovery, right, the new version of WoW Classic that has a bunch of changes, runes, abilities, all this other sort of stuff, playing that with a bunch of my friends, right, where we were leveling together, right, we were all, oh, what part of the quest are you on, right, oh, I'm on this one, okay, well, I'll help you do this part of the quest, you'll catch up to me, we'll do these other quests together, oh, are you blacksmithing? Yeah, okay, I'm gonna send you these gems that are used in blacksmithing recipes, and you send me all of your cloth because I'm a tailor, right, like, all of that stuff, I think, is part and parcel with what makes WoW such like a, I don't know, like a bedrock of kind of social, I guess I would call this, let's call it social gaming, right?
And the stickiness that emerges from that social gaming is just like what these games need to sustain. If they go down the path of we are going to have a live service of some kind.
Yeah.
I do think part of that is like, like straight up just the size of raids in WoW. right? Like it's a thing that it's big enough that you need to find probably a group that's like relatively dedicated to it, and it's also big enough that like if you're a new player, your any non-mythic pushing raid can probably absorb a player that doesn't really
Right.
know what they're doing and like carry them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's fine for the sake of community, and then you can get into that community and you can start playing with those people and like basically become friends with those people and like engage in that social way, and then you don't cancel your sub because it's like, oh, I want to say hi to Dakota Sean on Tuesday night every week.
Yeah, exactly. It also means that you don't have the same issues. Like part of this I think is that it's like a PvE atmosphere, right? Which changes the sort of feeling of it. But there's also this thing of like, oh my god, you're so bad at this game, I never want to play with you again, right? Like that happens in like League or something like that, where you're playing and just one person's just fucking feeding. They're so dog shit at the game. You're just like, man, you know what? Let's just not tell so and so when we're gonna play League next time. But you don't really because the like a raid size,
like, outside the friendship, like that's like keeping secrets and like having
yeah, and by the way,
like
this is not to say that WoW raids obviously have drama. There is a lot of drama when you get 20 people together, right? But the individual contribution of a player in a WoW raid is an order of magnitude smaller, right? Than one of 3 people who are playing on your finals fire team. And I think that makes a pretty big difference because you know what? It means that even if I'm not going to blow anybody up, I'm name real players, even if I'm doing pretty poorly in the WoW raid, everybody is still happy to have me there, even though I'm just tanking the fucking floor for half the night.
Yeah.
Oh,
some derps talk about WoW drama. I'm just gonna start like ripping into people in the raid.
Hey man, it's I can pull that that thing, right? Like I usually damage people, but I also usually end up dying, so I'm not immune from it. But like,
listen, you're killing it. I was when we were doing Farak last night. I fucked up my seed the first time. Because I thought I was looking at Farak's tail and I was looking at his mouth and he was about to breathe fire on my face. And so the second time I grabbed a seed, I just stood right on top of you because I was like, I trust Mango to have good positioning. Anyway, so do we're a little off of the finals. What are your final thoughts on the finals? I guess is really where I want to end things.
Manik, you want to go first? That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I think it has real long-term potential. I feel like the folks who made this game knew exactly what makes this game work, and I think they were pretty intentional in a lot of their decisions, from time to kill to movement to map design to destructibility. Like they could have really gone like turned on the dial for creative expression more and said, we're not going to only allow destructibility, we allow you to build shit too in the environment. And they have some of that with barricades, but they like introduced constraints in all the right places that I think made it so much more than the parts that were brought to the table. So no, I'm a huge fan of it. And I think it gives folks who like the team play experience something to play with. It gives folks like me who kind of enjoy seeing what I can do outside of the meta with like throwing knives, something to play with, to get mastery on. So it appeals to a lot of these FPS archetypes. And I think it's going to do really well because of that.
Interesting. Embark Studios is based in Stockholm. I've never heard of these guys before.
I will broadly agree with you, Manik. I think they need to continue iterating, right? Because like I think the moment the meta gets stale, I think is the death knell for the game, right? Like if we go through like 6 months where like there is the meta doesn't necessarily need to be ever changing. It needs to be vibrant enough that there's like diverse viable builds.
Yeah.
But the moment like if the meta that existed yesterday continued for 6 months, I think it would fall off of it quickly. But you said they're changing stuff. As long as they keep doing that, I think every once in a while they inject a couple new weapons or something to keep it fresh. I think that'll I think that'll give it some staying power. We have not. None of us, I don't think, have played. Have you played ranked, Manik? You're the only one that would have.
No, I haven't played ranked yet. No.
Yeah. I just wonder how that is, and if that's like, because that's got to be like what they're aiming for, right? They're trying to do like like a shooter League of Legends, and so that would be that's my only thought, is that like I can see myself getting sweaty, but I could also see myself getting the way I was with League, which is like I fucking hate this game. Let's do it.
Yeah, but then you get on dummy thick heavy boy and get a sledgehammer and run through a wall. Like it's kind of fun, even if we
right,
lose.
right. No. There's that is I think a big part of it, right? It's like even when the highs are high, but the lows are not low, like in League,
Right.
and we talked a little bit about that. But like if I started caring about my ranking, then that can bring the lows lower, right? Like there's no ranking in PUBG, right? You just like drop again and maybe you get a chicken dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, buddy? What are your final thoughts?
I think at this stage, listen, at this stage of my life, okay, I'm an old man, okay, I'm an old fogey. I'm not good at these PvP shooters, because honestly, I think the thing that is gonna keep me from playing too much more of the finals is short time to kill is real. I'm bad at that. I am not good at aiming my gun, okay. But at the same time, this is probably the best sort of like PvP experience, like the new PvP experience I've had in quite a long time. Outside of maybe Spellbreak, which rest in peace.
That was a lot of fun.
I loved that game, honestly. I really wish they could have, made it happen. Outside of maybe Spellbreak, I haven't really been kind of captured by the feeling of a PvP game in quite a while. So I guess that's I guess that's where I'm ending up when it comes to the finals. I wish they had some lore, okay, and I wish that their logo wasn't so dumb. Do you guys ever think of this? Because it's just like a triangle, but it's like an F on its side or whatever. And I was just like, this is the worst.
I didn't even notice that.
This is the worst.
Oh Jesus.
Yeah, right.
The name, the finals, like what
the name is also really dumb and bad. I mean, I part of this I think is because I'm a professional and I can't help but think about this stuff. But I just like looked at that logo and I was like, whose fucking stupid ass idea was this dumb ass sideways F logo? Okay. Anyway, Manik. It has been the two of you are gonna fuse like in Dragon Ball Z and create Mongo. Yeah,
that'll be great.
It's been a while since you've been on the cast. Tell us about it. What have you been up to?
Good, man. It's been great. I mean, it was the podcast journey with Akshay and I was always a ton of fun, and we always appreciated you guys listening to it. You were like one of our few consistent listeners when we were actually doing it. And major props to both of you for continuing with this. Like, it's a pretty big testament to consistency and love of the craft and love for gaming. Like, it's pretty awesome. I've been doing good, man. Sorry.
Love for gaming in a year where we're like 10 or 12 episodes were just Fast and the Furious.
After we did 20 episodes on like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, my favorite casts of you guys are always the end of the year casts. I think one year I submitted like 3 questions, and I like one of my questions was like, "Do you believe in love?" or some deep questions like this, and you guys like, "Oh, I'm going to actually answer this." And one other question I had once was, "Who's the best video game player you know?" And Mango said it was me, and that made me all warm and fuzzy inside.
Oh, I wonder who I would have said. I don't remember. I never remember any of this shit though. I do love the big anniversary episodes though.
Those are awesome.
Yeah. That's a good time. So before you were playing the finals, this is what I'm interested in. Before you were playing the finals, what were you playing? Like, what is on your?
Yeah, I mean, a mix of things. I mean, I jumped around a lot, so I was playing a lot of automation games, and I
like Factorio.
Factorio likes Factorio, Dyson Sphere
God.
Program, Atrio, all of these things, Nova Lands. That was partly because I enjoy those games, but also selfishly, part of what I'm up to right now, and Mango's helping, is kind of building an indie game that has automation elements in it. So I want to do kind of research on that. So that was part of my mindshare, was playing automation games. Then I was playing Baldur's Gate. And playing a lot of Baldur's Gate, and I've restarted Act 1 like 3 times at this point, and just like finally getting to Act 2. So I'm not that far, but been enjoying that a whole lot. And then outside of that, it was Age of Wonders. I tried that for a little bit of time, and then Cyberpunk. I beat Phantom Liberty, which was phenomenal. I'll stand by. I'll defend this till death. Like, Cyberpunk is a masterpiece. People will realize in time it got way too much flack when it got released unnecessarily. They will have their moment in the sun, and I think they already are. I love Cyberpunk, and Phantom Liberty I think is truly impressive.
I have not gone back to the game after Phantom Liberty, but I don't know. Maybe I should. I definitely, it's funny because I think I was talking on the podcast about watching all of the Tim Rogers reviews again, and my second run through, I was much more critical of his point of view, because I don't know. It just feels like I think the arguments he was making were just kind of fundamentally poor. I felt like I was constantly sitting there in my head, poking holes in them and being like, "That doesn't make sense." This is
Specifically on the Cyberpunk interview review.
Well, yeah. I mean, to be fair, it was all of the videos were kind of like building towards Cyberpunk, but yes, the Cyberpunk video kind of itself, right? I think most games have the problems that he was sort of ascribing to Cyberpunk in the way that we always talk this. Water finds a crack is what we call it, right? Which is just that players just naturally find kind of the most efficient ways for them to I don't know, build things. And I don't know, maybe in a world where there's a different level of balance compared to what I had sort of experienced, which was I don't even really remember. I wasn't even doing a build that I thought was like all that good. It's just that maybe it's just like the nature of how these sorts of games work. I was doing I had a katana that was really cool and good, and I just walked at people and slashed them with it, and they would do a lot of damage to me, but I had functionally infinite health packs, and I just kept smashing the health pack button, and I basically never died because health packs were just draining credits, and whenever I needed credits, I just like went, you know what I mean? And I was just like, I almost think that's like the WoW player in me, to be honest, because
Did you beat Cyberpunk? I'm trying to like, how far did you get?
Oh man, I got real close to beating Cyberpunk.
Okay.
I got to the hotel where you talk to the person. I got past
Aniko?
that. Aniko. I got to the float. Oh no, that's before.
Did you get to the point where it says finish everything because you can't go back from here?
Shit, yeah, that must be where I got.
Okay.
I think I was supposed, because you're going to Arasaka Tower, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, okay. So I got to that point, and then it said I had to finish everything. No, actually, yes, I did get to that point. But the thing that got me to quit the game, actually, was I was really pissed because I had a conversation with you, Mango, where you told me that you saved the guy's life, and I didn't realize you could do that. I thought it was scripted that he fucking dies. I didn't realize it was on me. The samurai guy, the Japanese guy, who's super cool. I love that guy.
Yeah, you could save Takamura.
Yeah, Takamura's
my boy.
Didn't even occur to me. Which, to be fair, is my own failing and underestimation of sort of like the RPG-ness of Cyberpunk.
But most important question for all these games, I always ask, who did you romance?
Well, Pan Am. Though I didn't encounter...
Meg, are you a Pan Am boy too?
I was, yeah.
We're all Pan Am boys.
I thought there's only 4 romance options, right?
Pan Am, Judy, River, and... It's only 3?
No, there's also, because I was going to say
Carrie.
I would maybe romance that like old gay twink rock star, because I don't know, that looked like fun. That looked like a good time. Obviously, I liked Pan Am quite a bit, and she fit really nicely in my like lore, which was like I was one of these. I think they're called the nomads, right? I was a nomad, and I like to think of myself as like a tough biker gang nomad guy who came into the city, like I don't know why. This is just like the lore that I had set for myself.
I identified less with like the biker aspect for the nomad, but more just like off the beaten path, outside of the city, living, that whole aesthetic. I don't know, compared to like other of these open world FPS game, like action adventure and narrative based games. I don't know what the right terminology is in terms of genre. Like I look at the next closest thing that was released was maybe Starfield in terms of big AAA release. Yeah. And I feel like the enjoyment I got out of Cyberpunk in terms of a coherent, consistent story experience, even if the choices didn't matter consistently, was like far more immersive and far more enjoyable than I got out of Starfield. Like I think it went down the kind of procedural building of game a little too much without losing like actually just like tell really nice, well-built stories in a consolidated environment and have an arc there is probably a better player experience. That's my take. I think there's a lot of it's not a Starfield cast. We probably spend a lot of time just on
Oh
Starfield.
yeah, I mean, it's funny. I said nice things about Starfield, and then I just sort of never really picked it up. I never really picked it up again. I just identified I got really fixated on this like pirate system where I was just building my ship out, and I was doing everything was all oriented around my ship. I was like, oh, this is cool. I can make a really sweet ship. I'm going to do a bunch of stuff, make a lot of money, make my ship cool. And then I kind of did that, and I just like all of a sudden I had no goal anymore, and I fell off the game kind of entirely. I think part of that is an IP problem, which is essentially what I'm sort of agreeing with you, that like so much of it is like procedurally generated kind of like muck that I don't really care. I remember a couple of years ago, and by a couple of years ago, I guess I mean Jesus Christ, 10 years ago, when No Man's Sky was
I was about to say, like, have you revisited that?
I actually really vibed with the No Man's Sky, but I vibe with the No Man's Sky in a completely opposite way, right? Because I'm not looking for a narrative experience with the No Man's Sky. I'm looking for kind of the exploration, running around with my little gun, scanning rocks, all this, all that stuff. But when No Man's Sky,
I kind of feel like that dichotomy is like, I feel like Todd Howard and team wanted you to feel like an explorer in Starfield and had that sense of wonder. And I feel like I got more of that from a No Man's Sky than I got from Starfield.
Starfield's kind of cookie. The problem is, like, they nailed it in Skyrim, right? Which is why Skyrim is still getting, released today, 1,000 more editions forever, Skyrim forever, right? But like Starfield didn't have like because you can't really like actually just like walk. The thing that worked with Skyrim, I think, is like you walk from place A to B and you get distracted along the way, and you can't really do that in Starfield, which I think is to the game's detriment. And not just like that you have fast travel, but like there's nothing along the way to distract you and to be interesting. At least in the bit I played, because I fell off that game hard too, even though it kind of hit me in the kind of like Journey Amongst the Stars type stuff, right? But
I mean there's also, I mean, I also just think that the Elder Scrolls world was much more fun and engaging than the world of Starfield. I mean, I even recommended on the podcast, I was like, I told people, I was like, I was really not connected to this game until I did that like thing where I got recruited into like the Marines or whatever. And when you do that, you go through like an in-universe sort of like history lesson where you learn, oh, this is the Freestar whatever, these are the other guys. And I was just like, okay, I get it. This is sort of like the setup. But then I just kept progressing the main story, and I never got to a point where the stakes kicked in or like the lore around the universe started to actually get in my brain, and I was infected by it, and I was like, yes, this is fun. I'm really like on board. That happened to me instantly in Skyrim, right? There's a fucking dragon, okay? You go down to that first town and he sends you up into the Barrow Den or whatever.
Even the opening scene, it's like you're about to, if I remember Skyrim, you're like facing an execution. Big moment happens, and what do you do in fucking Starfield, if I remember? Go mine some fucking rocks for 15 minutes.
And it's just
pick
like
up a stone.
It's like, then and it builds on itself really well, because you go to that first town, you do a couple quests. Okay, I understand questing. Then you go to Whiterun, and now you're learning all about the politics. Oh, there's this rebellion. There's the Stormcloaks, and they want freedom, but they're racist. And then there's the Imperials, right? and they want, I don't know, they want to be oppressive, but they're also kind of weirdly egalitarian. And it's just like, I could that all of that stuff is texture I can like latch onto. There's just like wasn't enough. Even Space Cowboys, I love Space Cowboys, but I just couldn't get into Starfield on that level. And I think
the
this
only
is
image now is just like that meme of like, here we go again. I might have to download Skyrim.
I mean, it's funny because I had the same complaint in Fallout 4, right, where I talked about how soulless it felt when you got the one guy, because you had your like towns or whatever, your player built towns, which is pretty fun. I got into that system. But then there was a guy, and you would go to your towns, and some guy would say, did you hear about some trouble over this way? And it would give you the procedurally generated quest. And I was like, kill me, this sucks, fuck this. Everything in Skyrim or other stuff, right, like even WoW has this feeling, right? It feels handcrafted, right?
Yeah.
So even though the world of Azeroth is much smaller than the world of Starfield by however many, orders of magnitude, I am much more down to go questing through Elwyn Forest in Season of Discovery and essentially treat that as like a 2023 open world RPG than I am, I don't know, playing Starfield.
I do think it was almost a technology problem too, and I feel like this dream of procedurally generated world that you can immerse yourself in was limited pretty significantly historically. And I think now with whether it be AI content generation, AI voice on top of the content that's being generated, heuristics on the character with AI, like I feel like now that dream of I will have a procedure generated world with procedural quest givers that have their own motives and goals, and that dream of you are literally the first person to experience this and it's actually really interesting and good is possible. Like that, I'm excited about that next generation of RPGs. I feel like that needs to be the next, next landmark. I feel like we've done all that can be done in the current models with like different flavors and theming. Like, yeah, you got your GTA, you got your Cyberpunk, like different mixes. But I think the next leap is, I do think Todd's probably right on like the next leap is procedural, but I just don't think the technology was there to get it right.
It's interesting.
Specifically with Bethesda too, right? Like Bethesda, like I don't know, it didn't feel like it's supposed to be like a newish version of their engine, but it didn't feel like it.
That's true too.
Yeah, the load times. I actually bet if there was one thing that broke my focus on the game more than any, it's loading screens, right? They're all over that.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's not even like I'm playing on a 4 terabyte solid state disk, right? Like it's not even like, my load times should be relatively super short, but it gives me 10 seconds to just get distracted by like something else. And it's not that other games don't have load screens, right? Baldur's Gate has load screens or whatever, but Baldur's Gate just had far fewer of them because you were just like kept in the moment. In a certain sense, I actually think Baldur's Gate is a pretty good counterpoint to the Starfields of the world, which is to say that like, man, a huge, massively crafted, but like very like intricate and meticulously crafted RPG has a real space for people, and that's the kind of thing that they want to sign up for and go play. Even though I am famously on record that I think it's worse than the other CRPGs that have been coming out recently. I haven't tried Rogue Trader yet, and we're gonna see how Rogue Trader is. But Kingmaker and Wrath of the Righteous do a pretty similar thing, and I would actually say they do a better job of fulfilling the fantasy that I want them to fulfill, which is being able to play D&D by myself. Right?
Yeah. I think like when I played Wrath of the Righteous, I felt like it was a more, I haven't played a ton of D&D like you guys, but it felt mechanically more of a true simulation of the experience. I play Baldur's Gate for the story and choices, like less so than the RPG mechanics per se or character stat mechanics.
Part of that is that Wrath of the Righteous is based on Pathfinder, which is a crunchier system than the current edition of D&D.
Yeah.
I have heard that Rogue Trader is supposed to be neat because it doesn't have some of like the weird crunchiness of Pathfinder money. I have heard that Wrath of the Righteous and Kingmaker expect you to like pre-buff a lot if you're playing on the harder difficulty levels, and like that's just like not a thing in the system that Rogue Trader is built in. And so it's a little bit more approachable for normies. But yeah, I really enjoyed the demo I played at Gen Con of Rogue Trader, so I think I'm going to pick that up at some point.
Yeah, I plan to, and this one also has multiplayer, right? So I think that was the other thing that really that was the other thing that really appealed about Baldur's Gate, right? Like being able to play essentially like D&D with your friends, but against kind of the computer, so to speak, right? I loved Wrath of the Righteous, and to be fair, I only played Kingmaker. I loved Kingmaker, right? And I got really into that game. Boy, I sank deep into it. But I think a version of things where we're playing Kingmaker, and it's 5 of us, around our computers. We're all in Discord voice. We're hanging out. We're having a good time. There's no DM, but there's kind of the computer, right? And like that absolutely appeals to me in a lot of ways. Even though it also creates the thing of, oh my god, hurry up, do your turn, so I can spend 5 seconds clicking on the attack button.
Yeah.
Are there
Baldur's Gate soon?
Did you finish Baldur's Gate, right, Mango?
Yes. Yeah. We did our finale episode on. I have yet to go back and do like, the epilogue part. I re-downloaded it so I could do the epilogue, but I just haven't gone and done it yet. Um, uh, but I've mostly been playing Street Fighter.
Oh, interesting. Nice.
Finals. Just because like it's the like I really like Street Fighter. I'm not gonna say I don't, but a big part of the benefit of it is like, I've got 30 minutes. I can sit down and play some rounds of Street Fighter and not worry about like continuity or anything. I keep meaning to go back to Cyberpunk, but it's like I don't have enough time. I'm gonna go play some rounds of Street Fighter or play a couple rounds of the finals, right? Like
Yeah.
But yeah. Did we want to talk about the Bungie stuff at all?
Oh yeah. Okay, where I left off, I was like, I pin it. I'll talk about it. What was the question? Do you remember?
Well, let's say, Manik, you're probably one of us who has played it most recently. Is Destiny good right now, or is it in one of its low points?
I'd say objectively, Destiny is the best it's ever been. And so like the criticisms of Destiny have been like in a couple of buckets. I think one bucket was there's not enough content, or I feel like content is being taken away from me. And that was legitimate. Like, I don't know if you know this history, buddy, but
the
there's a point in time in Destiny, they vaulted, quite a significant amount of content that people paid for, and a lot of great content that people really loved. Just like straight up vaulted. They hinted at it, and they also gave pretty long advance, but factually it's like a ton of content lost. So there was this big view. It's like, we just lost a ton of content. Destiny does not have enough content to sustain itself.
Can I just ask about the mechanics of this? Because I know about the phenomenon, but I don't know the specifics. Was that content current content? It was like old raids, right?
But it was old raids and old campaigns too. Okay. So if someone if a new player came in and said, I want to experience the Destiny story, they would be plopped into a story that's been ongoing for 6-7 years, and they would not be able to experience how the story actually happened in the core campaigns, outside of seasons, outside of all that seasonal content.
Interesting.
So like the Red War campaign and other things like that were vaulted.
And then also the raids, like for instance, when we played Destiny 2 on launch, we did that raid, we did that stupid basketball boss or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I wouldn't be able to go back and do that boss today.
Yeah.
Would there be any reason for me?
So something changed. So they vaulted a lot of content, and that was a legitimate criticism to say content's vaulted, content's lost, can't enjoy it. I think fast forward now, you have almost too much content. It's like tons of dungeons, tons of phenomenal raids. I think the raid you played, buddy, is probably the weakest out of the bunch.
Wow.
So the raids have increased in quality and have everything from more mechanically complex to those like get in and have fun raids, and same thing on the dungeon side. So content is not a fair criticism anymore. I think there's too much content, quite frankly, in the PvE. PvP, I think, needs more maps, but I think they're delivered on that promise. I think the other big criticism was a lot of quality of life, where it's like, I can't fucking change my loadout effectively in game. I can't find a team in game well enough. The armor system's kind of confusing. I can't really build craft the way I can in other RPGs because of the limitation of the FPS model and the balancing act that people have to play. And they've solved almost all those. Like quality of life, you can have loadouts. The armor craft system is much stronger. You have real build crafting now, much more so than before, where I feel like before you're hyper reliant on your weapons you chose, and who really cares about your armor choices. And now you actually have to make a lot more. You have to put more thought in the decisions you make on crafting your armor. So I think build diversity is there now. So that's not a fair criticism. And then the things that were never criticized, which is like the fundamentals, which is like the gunplay feel and mechanics around the ability usage in gunplay is just like still unmatched to this day, in my opinion. I think there's games who do movement better. I don't think any game does that like synergy of like recoil, gunplay, how it feels when you shoot a weapon, how it feels when the weapon actually makes impact with an enemy and the enemy reacts to the damage and dies or explodes or so on and so forth at scale. That I think Destiny still crushes it. So all in all, I think all the criticisms have been addressed, but the feeling of the game, the sentiment is probably the worst it's ever been. And it's kind of hard to diagnose why that's the case. I think it's Bungie's poor marketing. It's streamers and YouTubers looking for clickbait. So like negative attention sells more, and I think it's just cascades from that. It's
so
like,
much like WoW, to be honest with you, from a couple of years ago.
It's like, all right, well, this guy says it's not fun anymore. I guess I don't think it's fun anymore. It's like it's more people supplanting their own emotions and feelings about the game with just like an appropriated thing. Because objectively, I see no reason why if people previously liked Destiny, they would not like it even more. And the criticisms previously people had are irrelevant now. I think the writing's gotten a bit worse. But all in all, boys, like if you guys want to play some Destiny, I would play Destiny over any other game any day. I love that game so much. So yeah, it's sad to see. I think they really have not managed the community well. They've had some misfires in writing. They've had some misfires in microtransactions. I think with a better communication strategy from Bungie, the sentiment around Destiny would be significantly better, because they've done a pretty Herculean effort over the past 2-3 years to make the systems a lot more fun and a lot more engaging.
Interesting. So when it comes to too much content, does that mean that there are old raids that are considered current content? Like I could go to that raid from Destiny 2's launch and get gear. Wow.
So what they do is they rotate raids every week. Oh. And so they have legacy raids rotating, and you can play the legacy raids and get powerful gear in those legacy raids alongside the current raid that's happening in the current dungeon that's happening. So they're rotating a lot of this content weekly, so it keeps things fresh. Like, oh, I haven't played Crota's End in years. Let me go play that. Let me play King's Fall, which is huge, which is like the famous raid from Destiny 1, which is truly, in my opinion, one of my favorite gaming experiences of all time. Was the first time I played King's Fall in Destiny 1, and they brought it back in Destiny 2. It's just as great. So yeah, so they've done those types of things to keep the content pretty fresh.
That's so crazy to me. Is there just an expectation that players understand these raids instinctively? I get because they're classics, or I wonder, have they ever talked about the thought process? It's wild to me that you would rotate in raids weekly.
Yeah. And you can choose, right? You can choose which one you want to play, but they have a fire team finder, and part of that fire team finder experience is the concept of a Sherpa. So you can kind of register yourself as, I'm a Sherpa for XYZ raid, and you can do a Sherpa run raid or just a normal raid where you match with people, or of course, build your own fire team externally to Destiny. But now you have this kind of safe, controlled environment of a Sherpa raid where someone is guiding you through the mechanics, and you can go experience this really cool piece of FPS content that I don't think many other FPSs have really been able to crack the nut of raid in that type of genre well, like Destiny has. Like, it's still uniquely singular as raid experience in an FPS.
God, that is so wild, because like WoW raids are built entirely orthogonal to this, right? A WoW raid is built to be a project that you and your group of friends progressively tackle over the course of months, right? We have just started, because you do it on normal, right? And then you do it on heroic. And the goal for a lot of people is called AOTC, ahead of the curve, which is to kill the final raid boss on heroic. And that is expected as a week 12 to week 30, like a goal for a lot of guilds, right? We got our ahead of the curve last season, a couple of weeks, maybe like 4 or 5 weeks before the season ended. And a WoW season is like 5 or 6 months long, right?
Yeah.
Because the idea is you build your gear so slowly, right? You get at a certain point, you are fighting for individual item levels, right?
Right.
You're fighting for individual item levels. You're fighting for an item that is the same eye level, but that has better secondary stats, right? So like, I know that my secondary stats are haste mastery or crit haste or something, and so I opt
against the other players you're playing with, right? In Destiny, everybody gets a piece of gear, right?
Everyone gets on each encounter of the raid, and you do have that part of the system too. You have 2 tiers of raids. You can play it normal. You can play it, I think it's called legendary. I forget the terminology they use. And in that, you do have to make sure your gear is basically pinnacled out, fully infused. Like, you have to grind for that. I don't think the timeline is as long as what you're saying for WoW is, where I think like people can get raid ready for legendary within like a month and a half of this raid's release. Maybe even shorter if people are really grinding it. But in that model, it's like it's not only light level grind, but it's also very specific builds that you have to choose to survive these encounters effectively. They definitely dial up the difficulty, where the expectation is people who complete these legendary raids have to be kind of pretty disciplined about what they're doing and commit.
That's wild to me. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, and then
Which
the other thing
before they did not have that either.
Yeah, and then the other thing is Mythic Plus, right? Which is that every season you get a new set of dungeons, but that set of dungeons are the same dungeons for a whole season, right? So right now we have 6 dungeons from like the past of World of Warcraft that have been brought to the present, and then 2 very recent dungeons. And that Mythic Plus is it's timed, and when you time it, you increase your key level, and there's a bunch of cool stuff that you can like do with that and all of that sort of thing. But like all of this stuff, all of this stuff in WoW systems is built towards long-term kind of mechanical mastery of very particular fights, right? And you get that feeling of, boy, when we fought Smolderon on week whatever, he was real hard. But now when we get to Smolderon, we just like absolutely trounce this guy, right? And it's like that's the kind of satisfaction. Or when I'm doing a Tal Dazar on a 14 at the beginning of the season, like a plus 14 key at the beginning of the season, it is the hardest dungeon I've ever done in my life. But now I can time it on an 18 without any issue, right? And we're just like slowly climbing these gear levels week over week over week. It is wild to me that every week the raids in Destiny change, because like that long-term progression I think is the thing that WoW is probably geared for and looking for. And it's my it's my obvious comparison point for raiding. But also at the same time, I almost sort of wondered, like Destiny raids, because there's no tank, healer, ranged or melee DPS, right? There isn't that same sort of like, I don't know. Is there like a team sports nature to it? Like,
you do have a little bit more build crafting, and they're trying to make folks like the Warlock be more of a support class. They can build into more of a support role. And of course, Titan can build into more of a tank role, but the roles are never as clearly defined. And there's still a ton of overlap. Where I think in other RPGs, like you can hard commit to a healer doesn't really exist in the Destiny world.
Yeah, and there's no tank, right? Like, how does aggro work? Does it just do damage? Do these bosses just fight people?
So you can basically, people can pull aggro from a boss based on kind of the visual of the boss and certain boss mechanics, but that can be anyone. But Titans can serve as a heavy because they or a tank, because they can place a barricade in front of them, and they have some other abilities that blockade, like their super that builds a defensive bubble, dome shield around them that other players can enter. So there are abilities that lend themselves to the classical, tank support, offense type of classes, but it's not like you slot into that in advance of the raid. I mean, there's some people who discuss that and plan that out, and they do in the legendary amounts, but it's definitely I think a pro and a con for the game. I kind of like that they don't have those hard roles, but I can see how that changes, where you don't feel as connected to your character if you haven't really put in the effort and earned it, and earned playing that role.
It's also interesting because, like, for instance, right now for one raid, I am a melee DPS, right? And so my job is wildly different than in the other raid where I'm a healer, right? And my job is keeping everybody, keeping everybody alive. I'm just clicking on health bars. Okay, that's all we're doing. But it's just like, it completely changes the way that I interface with the raid. Which has actually made me like really enjoy the current sort of iteration of WoW that I've been going into. Anyway, I'm sorry for grilling you on these fucking mechanics. It's crazy. I'm super interested, I guess.
Interesting too. I was gonna say it's interesting too, because like one of the other things is like, something we do in raid is like we do logs and we see how we're doing compared to ourselves, to like the wider community and to like the other people on our team. And like that, I feel like just doesn't exist in Destiny. Right?
No, not at all. Yeah.
And so like it's harder to like your raid group, I guess, can get the mastery feeling. Like I know that when we've played like after the first couple times we clear the raid, it's actually pretty simple to clear it past that. But there's no sense of progression in that sense, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Your number go up. as it were. But sorry, buddy, you were gonna say?
I'm interested. Do you think are they going to get the I don't know, are they going to get the community back on track? Like what is the strategy that you've seen from Bungie recently outside of just get really crazy articles written about the
I
behind
know,
the
right?
scenes stuff?
Well, I mean, I feel like team morale is probably really bad right now. So I feel
Yeah.
like it's going to be like internally in that studio, it's probably pretty tough to get any great work done. So hopefully they pull it off because I care about the stuff they make. Um, but I feel like Final Shape, they've been cooking it for a long time. They just delayed it to I think June from February, so a few more months.
Wow.
And I mean, they really have to nail that. We're talking about a 10-year long saga that's coming to a conclusion narratively, and I think if they nail that, then I think people will be back on the Destiny bandwagon for a bit of time. We'll be excited what they do with the franchise coming forward because I still think there's an anime series in the works. Like, I think they're trying to plan out like what does the next decade of Destiny look like, and I think that only will be viable if Final Shape is truly, a critical success. I think they can. Like, Bungie. I think they can definitely pull something like that off because they keep learning, and I feel like a lot of the heavy lifting of fixing some fundamentals of the game have happened over the past 2-3 years where they can get back to let's build a really great story and experience around that and get players happy versus I feel like their teams were so split on reacting to player sentiment, also trying to build a story at the same time, also trying to fix these old systems that have been in place in the game for like 4 or 5 years where they couldn't just focus on what matters most. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful, but people were saying my words were the exact same words I would say like a year and a half ago when the Lightfall came out, and Lightfall was a pretty big disappointment.
Wow, really? Okay, yeah. I mean, I get that. The funny thing is, we just watched like a huge cycle of this happen in WoW. I think honestly, a lot of it is the thing that resonates with me most about that is the way in which it is the best the game has ever been, and still people are complaining, which I think is I almost want to call it recency bias. It's not quite recency bias. It is kind of inertial bias, right? People don't calibrate their feelings towards how things were, right? They're not looking at it that way. They're thinking about the pain points as they are now. So when WoW makes a bunch of iterative changes again and again and again and again and again, and there's honestly kind of more to this that I think could be a whole podcast episode about how like bad luck protection systems work when it comes to like loot and how people engage with power progressions in the game. But if that's the stuff that matters, right? It's not that this is the best the game has ever been. It's these pain points are the most annoying they have ever been, and I don't quite care about any of the good stuff to have that overwhelm my feeling of raw annoyance, as well as all the other stuff you were mentioning, right? Like clickbait YouTubers who make shitty videos just to whatever. I mean, all that stuff is that stuff, right?
I mean, it's another conversation we can have. Is just like, how does a studio operate in this environment where like the default mode setting of a gamer is criticism and negativity? No matter, it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. I can't think of any real franchises where the sentiment is like consistently glowing. Maybe it's just more reflective of the current time we're in.
Have you never met Final Fantasy 14, critically acclaimed, whatever the copy pasta expansion?
Yeah, I mean, like I think the only like studio I feel like that has that type of rabid following in the positive direction is maybe like a Kojima.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe, he gets flack too, but
I also sort of wonder if it's like a games as a system sort of thing, right? That the process of steering such a huge ship all the time for any of these games means that you're just never really agile enough to always appeal to and capture the audience of your player, because part of the is you always have to be taking bets. Is this next Hearthstone expansion going to be fun? Is this next TFT set going to be fun? Is this next season of League of Legends going to be fun? It's like you are adding new things to draw players in to keep them engaged, because you don't want to just give them the same content over and over again. That makes things stale and repetitive, and it makes players churn, right?
Yeah.
But when you do that, you necessarily have to just sort of, place your bet on, I think it will be cool if, I don't know, what's some like dog shit mechanic that got introduced to a game and then immediately got patched out. How many times have I seen that happen in, like in any of these live service titles? Yeah.
And this is the thing we've also talked about, which is like, there's some aspect of this that's like, people have preferences, and those preferences aren't always like, it's not like objectively bad. It's that some people prefer it one way and some people prefer it another. And when you make a choice in one direction, you alienate the other, piece of the audience.
That's
and
true.
If you swing back in that direction, you alienate the first set of people. So,
honestly, I felt very alienated by a lot of what's going on in Dragonflight, because I was a player who really engaged. Like Shadowlands and Battle for Azeroth were my expansions. I loved those expansions. I played so much WoW, right? I have played comparatively much less WoW in Dragonflight, and I think it's because fundamentally at the end of the day, right, the developers are responding to the complaints of those players, and they're not responding to essentially the compliments of a player like me. Not that those things are all that common, right? And that's, that's okay. That happens. Sometimes you just get outvoted by the community, and you kind of have to live with it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
yeah. I think I'll wrap it up then. If you'd like to email us about any of the things we talked about on this podcast, you can email us at derpsplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@derpsplaygames.com, and follow us on twitch.tv/derpsplaygames, where these go out live. That are youtube.com/derpsplaygames. Rate and review us on iTunes or wherever you find podcasts. Everything else is down in the description. Manik, where do you want to point people if you want to?
Nowhere right now. I have no social media presence whatsoever.
Really? You're off Twitter?
Well, actually, I have I look at memes on X/Twitter when Mango and Akshay send me stuff. So I do occasionally doom scroll Twitter. Connect with me on LinkedIn, y'all. That's where I'm at.
Oh my God.
LinkedIn connect.
Shit. Yeah, okay.
Buddy, you have anything you're looking to promote?
I have nothing that I'm looking to promote.
Didn't you guys drop a trailer or something for like the...
That's true, for the Horror Games Award. I actually have two things to promote. One, for the Horror Games Award, our new game, Sorry We're Closed. It's very gay. That's what I always tell people. I say this game is super gay, which I really appreciate about it. It is a survival horror game in the kind of nostalgic PS1 Resident Evil era. We dropped a new trailer for that, and then we also dropped a new story deep dive narrated by me for our game Ever After Falls, which is coming out in early 2024, which I'm obviously also very fucking excited about. So yeah, I will promo those two things, Mango. Thank you for the reminder.
Welcome. Well, with that then, I'm going to say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners. Okay, fuck yeah.
Cool.
I don't remember how I did this before, but I will figure out the way to strip the audio off the...
If you just drag the file into Audacity, it'll strip the audio off of it.
Oh.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that sounds pretty fucking great. Thank you for coming by, Manik. I appreciate.
Yeah, of course. What did you guys think? That was fun.
Yeah, I also thought that was very fun. Honestly, I thought it was just like actually really insightful. I feel like it was one of the most insightful podcasts we've had in a long time.
Nice. Yeah, especially you offer a lot of different perspectives. Plus, like it was definitely great to have you on, Manik.